Hi, everybody. Welcome to English Digest. I'm Tom.
Hi, I'm Stephanie.
We're continuing to talk about our featured work of literature for the month of April, The Count of Monte Cristo, a novel by Alexander Dumas. And this book, of course, was written a long time ago, and it's a story of revenge and remorse. So the main character here, what's his name here?
Edmond Dantes.
Okay, Edmond Dantes.
Or the Count of Monte Cristo.
Yeah, my French isn't so great, but I've just been referring to him as the Count because the priest, when he died, told him about this treasure on this island. So he escaped from prison. The Count escaped from prison, went to that island, found the treasure, became rich, and became a count, the Count of Monte Cristo.
Then he went to Paris to get revenge on all his enemies that had set him up with a plot. Remember, they accused him of being a traitor. Then he moved to Paris at that point, right, to get his revenge, and he did. And at one point, it looked like his conscience was saying, hey, dude, this is bad. You know, you're ruining people's lives, but it isn't making you any happier. And that's the problem. If you go out and you get revenge on someone who's hurt you, you don't end up feeling better. You end up feeling worse. So I think the moral of this story or the moral of the novel is, revenge isn't worth it. You need to learn how to forgive and move on. Forgiveness of your enemies, only helps you. Who cares if it helps them? It helps you. So we're going to go ahead and talk a little bit about the author and some of the key themes in this. But first, it's my turn. I'm going to read through day 3. The Count of Monte Cristo sprang from the fertile imagination of legendary French author Alexander Dumas. Dumas was a very productive mid-19th century writer, publishing numerous classics such as The Three Musketeers. The inspiration for The Count of Monte Cristo came from police records, where he found the narrative of a French shoemaker who is accused of treason by his envious friends. Like Dantes, the man became rich and spent years plotting and carrying out his revenge. Indeed, revenge is the key theme of The Count of Monte Cristo. Dantes commits himself to this path while still in prison and will let nothing divert him from his course. Even when he realizes his schemes have brought about the tragic death of Villefort's wife and son, he does not stop. Though he experiences doubts, Dantes reinforces his convictions by visiting the prison and reliving his suffering. Yet as time passes, Dantes comes to see that revenge is empty, and this leads him to forgive Danglars. Dantes' other realization is that human justice has constraints. This revelation comes in 2 phases. At first, Dantes believes society cannot punish criminals harshly enough when their deeds have destroyed lives, such as in his own case. Because of this, he sets out to destroy his enemies and everything they value. He calls himself God's agent in punishing the wicked. However, as innocent lives are also ruined as a consequence of his actions, Dantes comes to see that human justice is limited because humans themselves are limited. Only God may sufficiently reward and punish mankind. Dantes abandons his revenge and goes in search of the happiness he has denied himself for years.
Okay, let's dive right into today's lesson. We're sort of breaking down our featured work of literature, The Count of Monte Cristo, and talking about some themes and ideas, and maybe you can apply them to your own lives as well. So again, it's all about revenge and remorse and regret in our featured novel. Now, The Count of Monte Cristo sprang from the fertile imagination of legendary French author Alexander Dumas. Remember, the S there is not pronounced in French, at least in this particular instance. And it sprang from his imagination. It came from his imagination, and we're describing his imagination as being fertile. which is the American pronunciation. I can imagine people from England saying fertile, but you can say it either way. Fertile just means it's got a lot of nutrients, like the soil, for example. Oh, this is fertile land. You can grow lots of rice here. You don't need to put any fertilizer in it because it's already fertile. And he has this fertile imagination. Yes, he thinks of all sorts of interesting ideas. Yeah, he wrote a lot. He was quite productive.
Yeah, in fact, one of his novels, which a lot of people will recognize, is The Three Musketeers. Of course, that was turned into several different movies. Very fun. I love that. So he was a very productive mid-19th century writer. So if you're talking about the 19th century, it's the 1800s, mid being around 1850, right? So he was busy writing when he was alive, and he published numerous classics. This is just one of them, The Three Musketeers. You might want to look him up and see what other books he wrote. The inspiration for the Count of Monte Cristo came from police records. So here's an author that does a little research to get some great ideas for some books. I love this guy. So he probably had maybe a friend that worked with the police and said, hey, let me go read through some of the records there and see if there's anything that looks interesting. A lot of our best books and movies come from real-life history of books, but it's kind of fun to see that he actually did real research. That's where he got this idea from.
Yeah, writers do that all the time.
Yeah.
And supposedly this book, The Count of Monte Cristo, was based on a real story. It was the narrative of a French shoemaker who was accused of treason by his envious friends. So this was a person in France who made shoes. I guess he was quite successful at it, and he had a lot of friends who were envious. If you're envious of someone, you really want what they have, or you really feel bad about yourself because they're so much better than you. I think we all have people that we are envious of, whether they have more money than we do, or they're, a better athlete than we are, or they have more friends or whatever. In this particular case, his friends were envious of him, so they came up with this charge and they accused him of treason, which is basically betraying your country.
Here it says he found the narrative of a French shoemaker. We're seeing this word a lot in news these days. A narrative is a story that it could either be, written or spoken. It's a story of connected events. We'll often talk about the media's narrative, what they want you to believe about the events that you're seeing in your everyday life. So narrative, the story of this French shoemaker. Interesting that his friends accused him of treason. It's so interesting. So like Dantes, this man became rich. So he got his revenge on his friends by becoming even richer than probably they thought he would. And he spent years plotting and carrying out his revenge. What a waste of your life. There's no happiness in that, but that's what he felt he had to do, is to get his revenge. So be careful. Envy doesn't lead to many good things. Be happy for your friends when they're successful, and you'll be happier too.
Yeah, I don't really have that experience of really hating somebody or resenting somebody, I should say. I was not really bullied in school and stuff like that. But I can imagine there are people out there who really hate someone after many, many years and might be looking for ways to get revenge. So maybe this story will help you deal with that. I'm not quite sure. But indeed, revenge is the key theme of The Count of Monte Cristo. So that's the main theme here. He was wronged by his friends. So he wants revenge. He wants to get back at them. And that's the main idea, the key theme of this novel. And Dantes commits himself to this path while still in prison and will let nothing divert him from his course. So remember, he had to spend a number of years in prison. And so while he was there, he had plenty of time to think this over. And he thought, when I get out of here, I'm going to get back at them. I'm going to get my revenge. They're going to pay for what they did to me.
Yeah, if someone diverts you from something, it doesn't have to be a person diverting you. It could be a circumstance that's diverting you. It just means it's taking your attention away from something that you're doing, or it's causing you to change your course or turn from one thing to another. Sometimes we'll see rivers diverted because they're going in the wrong direction, and they change the direction that river is going. So those really awful things that this man felt like he'd been through, they wouldn't leave him alone. So he just kept plotting his revenge, and no matter what happened, he was just so determined to complete his course, his path to revenge, and get the best of his enemies. I can understand being upset like that, but there's some really great stories of people who are put into prison wrongly and who use the time to change their lives and come out better people, but they don't dwell on revenge. They dwell on forgiving people. Now, here we've got the Count, and he realizes his schemes at one point have led to some tragic things. And that's when his conscience starts bothering him, as Tom said in our last program. We're going to talk about that, guys, but probably this is a good time to take a break. We're going to take a break and be right back.
大家好，我是安娜。我们昨天跟前天呢，带大家看了《基督山恩仇记》的故事纲要。那我们今天来讨论一下这个文学作品哦。当然，一开始要看一下到底作者是谁啦，他为什么写这个故事啦。这个作者啊，就是法国传奇作家大仲马。那么大仲马呢，他其实是19世纪中叶非常多产的作家，而且发表过许多知名的作品，很经典，比如说《三剑客》。那我们在第一段的第二句看到一个分词构句。第二句呢，这里的第一个动词是 was， 那么第二个动词其实是出版 publish。可是本身我们在谈到他出版很多这个不同的作品，他就是一个作家，其实这两件事情几乎是同一件事嘛。所以逗点之后省略的是连接词的 and， 所以如果不简化它，本来句子应该是 Dumas was blah 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 and published。 当我们把连接词省略之后，后面的动词直接变成动词 ing， 所以它其实是一个表同时这个动作同时进行啦，或者是状况同时进行的一个分词构句。好，那么《基督山恩仇记》这个故事到底怎么写的呢？其实它居然是根据真实的这一个故事来改编的耶。那么它的灵感是源自于警方的笔录，因为当时大仲马在笔录当中发现一个被嫉妒心很重的一个友人所控诉叛国的一个法国鞋匠的一个故事。好，我们来看一下这一段第三句的地方。这边呢，我们看到也有一个关系子句，而且其实大包小，有2个关系子句在里面。先行词是 police records， 警方的笔录。那么后面从 where 到句尾可以整个先括号起来。这个警方的笔录补充说明，加了个逗点，非限定用法 where， 在笔录当中He found， 大仲马看到了，发现了 the narrative 其实就是 story， 就是故事的意思。那么有一个法国鞋匠的故事，这个法国鞋匠 a French shoemaker 后面还带了一个限定用法的关系子句，从 who 一直到句尾的地方，所以这里再把它左右括号。那么这个鞋匠如何呢？他是被控诉 treason， 也就是叛国，而且是被他envious friends， 充满嫉妒心的朋友们。好，所以呢，这个故事其实到最后就像 Dentist 一样，这个法国鞋匠致富之后就花了很多年筹划进行他的复仇。那么当然我们提到了复仇 revenge， 就是整个基督山恩仇记的 key theme， 关键的主题。因为其实在 Dentist 仍然在监狱里面的时候，他就把自己投身于复仇之路，而且不让任何事情转移他的目标。我们看一下第二段第二句的地方，中间有一个连接词的 while， while 在这里指的是 when， 表时间。其实这里也是一个简化之后，但是还保留连接词的分词构句哦。while 后面本来应该有 he is still in prison， 但是呢句子被简化了， he is 整个摘掉。
We're going to take a quick break. Stay tuned. We'll be right back.
Okay, let's continue to talk about the themes and ideas in the Count of Monte Cristo. Again, this story was written by Alexander Dumas, and he based this story on some police records, something having to do with the narrative of a French shoemaker, and his friends were envious of him, and they accused him of treason. And, of course, here Dumas based his story on this incident. So revenge, again, is a key idea in this book. And again, Dantes, who is the main character, is all about revenge in this. Nothing will divert him from his course. Nothing will change his mind. And even when he realizes his schemes have brought about the tragic death of Villefort's wife and son, he does not stop. So he starts to discover that his schemes, his ideas, when he tries to manipulate things, all these things have brought about the tragic death of various people here. The wife and son died because of his revenge. Something's tragic when it's really, really terrible and it wasn't supposed to happen. If you die in a traffic accident, for example, that is tragic. It's a big tragedy. But even though he realizes that some innocent people are suffering because of his revenge, he doesn't stop. He still goes back to the prison to get his resolve back, to get his original hatred back again, and he continues to harm people.
Yeah, I think in the program earlier we said he went back to the prison to strengthen his will to continue. So when you see the word scheme, it usually means someone is making plans to do something maybe illegal or sort of devious or manipulative in a way that seems wrong. It doesn't always have to be, but here definitely. So his schemes have sadly brought about the death of Villefort's wife and son. But even though that's happened, he does not stop because he just, wants to complete his path of revenge. So though he experiences doubts, and that's what we mean when we say his conscience starts bothering him. If your conscience is bothering you, it just means you've done something wrong. You feel guilty. You feel like you should maybe apologize or, say you're sorry or, but you don't feel at peace. And so he doesn't let that stop him, though. He reinforces his convictions by visiting the prison and reliving his suffering, remembering how he felt. Convictions are things that you feel very strongly about, your principles, your convictions. These are things that you feel like you'll believe forever. So it's a really firmly held belief that someone just has a hard time changing your mind about your convictions. So he reinforces his plans or convictions by remembering how much he had to suffer in prison, and it was because of his enemies. Yet as time passes, it says Dantes comes to see the revenge is empty. It doesn't feel good. Where's the happiness that he wants? It's not there. I think he thought that he would feel happy getting his revenge, and this leads him to do something very different, and that's to forgive Danglars.
Yeah, lots of other people died first, but he still was able to learn how to forgive people, and he forgave Danglars. So that's better than nothing, I guess, even though a lot of other people still died in the process. But again, forgiveness is something that can be difficult for a lot of people, and you probably have to go through a lot of self-reflection and stuff like that in order to get to that point. But Dantes' other realization is that human justice has constraints. Okay, a realization is something that you learn, and it's usually something that's not really obvious, and you have to experience a lot of things and spend a lot of time until you finally realize this. I just realized that this is the case. I didn't know it for many, many years, and I just realized that my wife is having an affair with the milkman or something like that. Something like that, yeah.
Yeah, realization, something that hits you that maybe you hadn't thought through carefully before. So you're fully aware of something, that it's a fact, that it's happening, a realization. And of course, the verb is realize, to realize something. So he realizes that human justice has constraints. A constraint means it has limits. It's not perfect. We see a lot of people that commit crimes that the jury comes back and says, oh, they're not guilty. When most of us can see, obviously they're guilty. What's going on? Sometimes justice just doesn't happen on this earth. So it has constraints or limits. We have constraints on our time. You'd like to do lots of things every day, but we only have 24 hours. That's a constraint of time. Sometimes our resources have constraints. Constraints on our resources. We don't have enough money to do what we want. Well, this revelation comes in two phases. This revelation is just something he suddenly realizes. So it kind of comes to him, and he hasn't thought of it in the past, but it comes in two phases. What are those phases? A phase is just one part of a plan. So there might be 3 phases to a plan or 4 phases, but it's one step or one part in a plan. And at first, he believes society cannot punish criminals harshly enough when their deeds have destroyed lives. I've thought of that. What happens if you falsely accuse somebody who is then punished by being thrown into prison, and they find out he was innocent all along? They should really punish the person who lied about it. But that doesn't always happen.
Right, so there are 2 steps or 2 phases to his revelation, okay, which is also similar in meaning to realization. If you have a revelation about something, of course, that means you have a sudden increase in knowledge about something. You suddenly understand something that you did not understand before. And again, he believes that society cannot punish criminals harshly enough when their deeds have destroyed lives. Yeah, it won't bring those people back. Those people will still be dead, or their lives will still be ruined. And this is the case with him, okay? Even though he gets revenge on these people, or even though even if the government puts them in jail or something, it still does not really right that wrong. Something bad still happened.
Well, because of this and feeling like he can't get justice from just society and, the way our justice happens in life. We have courts and police and supposedly good judges, but we sometimes don't find that criminals are harshly punished, at least according to us. They should be punished more. So because of this, he sets out to destroy his enemies and everything they value. You notice that he doesn't actually kill anyone himself. What he does is manipulate people. He manipulates them to the point where they either kill themselves or somebody close to them suddenly wants to kill them. It's very interesting how he does it. But he also takes everything they value away from them. For Fernand, it was his reputation. He wanted people to admire him in high society, and suddenly he knew that people knew he was just a lowly fisherman. So he couldn't stand that, so he killed himself. He was very, very manipulative as he was getting his revenge on his enemies.
And we could say that he's taking justice into his own hands, or as it says here, he calls himself God's agent in punishing the wicked. So the government is not doing a good enough job to punish the wicked, to punish bad people, so he's going to do it for God. He's going to be God's agent. However, as innocent lives are also ruined as a consequence of his actions, as a result of his actions, Dantes comes to see that human justice is limited because humans themselves are limited. Okay, so that's where he starts to realize that, hey, we humans just can't take care of our own affairs. We need a higher power to do that.
So only God may sufficiently reward and punish mankind. Dantes abandons his revenge and goes in search of the happiness he's denied himself for years. So at the end of the book, he learns that what he's doing isn't the way to happiness, which is great. If you abandon something, you give it up. completely. So he's given up this idea of getting revenge, and he goes instead to find his own happiness, leaving his money behind. Abandon is also used to talk about maybe your car breaks down and you abandon your car on the side of the road. Or maybe you've seen people who take their pets they don't want and abandon them in an unfamiliar neighborhood. Don't do that. That's terrible. But this book does have a good ending in that you know that he has straightened his mind out. He knows that he can't be happy if he just is focused on revenge. And this time, he leaves that area, leaves his money behind, and goes in search of something that really will bring him true happiness.
Yeah, maybe he'll take a job as a fisherman himself.
Why not?
Or maybe a shoemaker.
Yeah.
Sounds like a respectable profession. Okay, that brings us to the end of our lesson for today. It's time now to listen to our Chinese teacher.
所以即使当他发现他的计谋导致了 Villefort 妻子跟儿子，还记得他们自己毒死自己吧，造成了这样子的一个悲剧之后，他还是不罢手诶。虽然他经历了怀疑，但是 Dentist 居然回到监狱，然后去回顾他自己的磨难，来强化他的信念。在第二段第4句的地方，我们来看一下 do something by do something else。 动词是 reinforce，强化自己的 conviction， 借由什么样的方式呢？ by 后面加动词 ing 就有表示借由做某个动作，借由那个方法。不过在这里的 by 之后有2个动作哦。第一个动作 visiting the prison， 重回监狱。第二个动作 reliving his suffering， relive 就是重温啊，回味的意思。好，不过呢，随着时光的流逝 Dentist 开始发现他的复仇其实很空虚，他也不觉得快乐，所以到最后还是原谅了 Danglers。 在这一段第5句最后一句的地方，我们看到第2个字的 as， 根据文意 as 在这里是 when 的意思。当然这个连接词，如果 as 是连接词，有 when because 如同好像这些意思，我们只能够根据文章的上下文去推断它的文意。好，那么当然后来他原谅了 Danglers 之后呢， Dentist 他还有另外一个领悟，他另外一个领悟就是他觉得人类的正义其实很有限。在第3段第1句当中，我们可以把 be 动词 is 先抓出来，前后我们可以打上斜线，这个 is 的前面当然就是主词咯，领悟。那么这件事情是什么呢？如果在 be 动词之后还要再加上完整子句的话，我们会用一个连接词 that， 因为大家要记住 be 动词并不是及物动词，所以 is 之后如果还有完整子句，像是在这里的 human justice has constraints， 我们就必须要用一个连接词，无意义的连接词 that 来连接 be 动词的 is 跟后面的 has。 好，在最后这一段第4句当中有一个关系子句，先行词是 everything， 后面呢是简化 that， 把 that 省略的剩下 they value 这2个字的关系子句。好，在这一段第8句，也就是最后一句当中，有一个关系词简化、关系词省略掉的这个关系子句，先行词是 the happiness 快乐，那么后面 that 或者是汇句省略掉之后，剩下的 he 到句尾可以左右括号起来，是整个关系子句。好，所以听众朋友呢，在这3天听过了这个基督山恩仇记的故事，跟我们稍微做的讨论，如果真的有兴趣的话，不妨好好研读这个作品哦。我是安娜，我们下次见。
That's it for today. Thanks for listening to our program, and hopefully we have inspired you to check out this novel yourself. Translations from French tend to be fairly easy reading in English. From all of us here at English Digest, I'm Tom.
I'm Stephanie.
Goodbye.
Bye.